we're good.
We're good to go now.
All right.
And we are live, Brent.
Okay, thank you. It is Thursday, February 24th. This is the Mid-Continent Public Library Building Committee meeting. My name is Brent Schondelmeyer. I'm chair of the meeting. I'm going to ask our board secretary to do a roll call to establish who's participating in the meeting and the fact that we have a quorum.
Michael, Brent,
Yes.
Joycelyn,
Yes.
Joycelyn, John,
Yeah, yes, here.
Yummy,
Here.
Michelle,
Here.
Ron. Okay, we have a quorum.
Okay, Joycelyn is in the room with myself. Michael may be able to join us later. I have learned from Michael that he has a standing conflict at this time, so we may try to figure out a different time for the building committee. And it's admirable. He's mentoring some sophomore students, and then
I just want to make sure I was muted when I joined.
And so anyway, so full participation is important, and Michael is co-chair, and so I became aware of that, and so we may look for a different time. There is the minutes in front of you to approve. Excuse me, the approval of the agenda. Somebody want to make a motion?
So moved.
Joycelyn makes the motion. Is there a second?
Second? John, second.
John Leahy, I think.
Yes.
Okay. All those in favor of the approval of the agenda, say aye.
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 Okay. All those opposed? All those who abstain? Okay. And then we have the minutes of our last meeting. Somebody want to look them over? Somebody want to make a motion to approve those?
I'll move approval, John.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor of the minutes, say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Okay. Anybody opposed? Anybody wants to abstain? Okay.
If I could just real briefly, Teresa and I have been talking a little bit about the minutes and particularly the closed session minutes that we have.
Okay.
We haven't been bringing those in for approval because of the pandemic, because so many of our meetings have been virtual, and typically the process for approving closed sessions is that you give people the minutes physically and then you collect them up after the vote. And so that's been virtually impossible in a virtual environment. Teresa's got a backlog of those, particularly for this committee. And we're going to start trying to get those together and get the backlog cleared out as we're starting to see each other in person a little bit more often. So just a heads up, and we'll be making a similar announcement at all the committee meetings.
No, thanks for the update on that.
Yeah, I had a question about, this is Yummy. Can I ask a question about
Yes,
that?
please.
Okay. That's sort of difficult. I mean, the whole purpose of minutes, I understand about the pandemic, but the whole purpose of minutes, I mean, we're not going to be able to remember, of course, what's happened weeks or months or a year, in the past. So is there some other way? Could they just a draft be emailed to the individual people who were there?
Yeah, typically we don't. The procedure is that for closed session meetings, you you typically do not distribute those. So let me, we'll need to talk with Mr. Grubauer about it if we're going to do something other than our normal procedure. So.
Yeah,
I mean,
I think,
Well,
yeah, talk
We'll
about it later.
we'll put this on the list. I'm a little bit like you. Seeing the notes are helpful to me to remember what we talked about. In the case of this particular committee is that can have sensitive information that can affect the price of a property that we want to, acquire. And, but I understand what it is that you're talking about. So we'll make a note of that and consider that and figure out how to do that.
Yeah, I really think this should be like a full board discussion because it should be a policy for every committee,
Yeah.
not just this one.
Oh, yeah. And
that's-
it would be most certainly. I mean,
Yeah.
I just wanted to give people a heads up that as we're starting to be together in person, you're probably going to see a bunch of these. And that's the reason why. Just wanted to make sure there was an understanding. So.
Mhm.
So in this particular meeting, we have one primary item of business, and it was actually an item we discussed in closed session. It's property acquisition, and I want to provide the rationale about why we're not having a closed session on that matter. We believe that we can have the discussion in open session because the discussion will not affect the price of the acquisition, because what we are contemplating, if we approve it, is a swap of a property that we own at Red Bridge, and I might talk about that a little bit more, with a new piece of property in East Independence, which would be a site for a library branch that we promised to build as a matter of Proposition L that the voters approved. So the discussion in open session won't affect the price. We just have to make the determination, are we receiving fair value for the new piece of property relative to the property that is being swapped. So I'm going to let Steve talk about it a little bit, and then I want to make sure we talked about it in closed session. I thought we had a very good conversation about it, but we're voting to do something, and we're voting to make a recommendation if we're so inclined to the full board, and I want to make sure people are supportive or understand or have their questions answered. So I turn over to Mr. Potter.
Thanks, Brent. It's Steve. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide, if you would. And what we've got here, actually in board docs, you should have 3 files. It's called Pages from the Trinity Woods Brochure, and that's what we're looking at on the screen here, if you can see the screen. And then we also have Red Bridge, which I believe that is the page from the capital plan, and just kind of gives you an indication a little bit about the building itself. And then there's also a document that's called 2022 February 22 EILOI, which is East Independence Letter of Intent. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to it. So anyway, just to refresh your information a little, or your knowledge, and to set the stage a little bit as to what it is that we're looking for. We had, as Brent mentioned, we had committed to build a library in East Independence as part of the Proposition L campaign in 2016. Part of this is due to what staff would argue is serving an underserved area that maybe, all things being equal, there should have been a library in this neighborhood in the last 15 years, but also that there has been some expected growth in this area. Anticipated growth in this area for the last several years, although that has not come as quickly as people would have expected. The fact that there was growth before that is not being as adequately served was part of the motivation. The Trinity Woods is a development that's being done in part by Lane 4. And Lane 4 just happens to be the company that manages, I believe owns and manages, the Red Bridge Shopping Center, where our Red Bridge branch is. The development here, just to set it borders I-70 and Little Blue Parkway. It's essentially the southeast corner of I-70 and Little Blue Parkway, going to the independent city limits, essentially, and then going down not all the way to US 40 highway, but just about. Already in the development is a couple of long-term care facilities and rehabilitation facilities. Children's Mercy Hospital is in the development. Corner Cafe is in the development. And they just broke ground on a very large multifamily project. Actually, not broke ground. I mean, it's there. I mean, there are people living in it. Across the street from the development is it's actually First Baptist Church of Blue Springs now. It used to be Tri-City Ministries. You may know it by that name. There's also right across the street the Blue Ridge Bank building, the multi-story Class A office complex, as well as a few fast food pads. The property that we're looking at, I think maybe if we go to the next slide, perhaps, yeah, here we go. So if we go to the next slide, as you can see on the icons, just down the road from the lower left corner, there's an icon for Costco and Lowe's. So it's right by Costco and Lowe's. It's right by the new Whataburger. It's in a good location in terms of traffic. There is a triangular shaped piece of property on the bottom of this drawing that's called Lot 31. It's about 5.5 acres. And it sets essentially on the corner of Little Blue Parkway and Heartland Drive, which is a signalized intersection. That's the piece of property that we're talking about. If you you can see it's triangle. So if you get to the point of the triangle, you can see at one point it continues to go east, and another place it sort of goes south. Where it goes east, it actually goes to a very large youth sports complex. Again, good proximity. All of these things, the reason I keep mentioning these things, these are great proximities for us. All of these things that I'm mentioning, not just good proximities, great proximities. As mentioned, sort of right next to the 5-acre slot is the multifamily that I was referring to. As you can see, it says sold, but it's pretty, it says it's coming soon on here, but it's pretty well completely built at this point in time. So in terms of building our building, we were looking for, sort of the bottom line is 3 acres, 5 acres, 5 to 6 acres is sort of the top line of what we would want for a library building. It has all utilities because it's a fully developed parcel. It was originally on the market for about, when I talked with Weston Buckley about this, I think he said that the market price was about $980,000, something like, just under $1 million. And so, which is competitive for the property in the general vicinity. Other properties within Trinity Woods are not as attractive for us because we might have to help build a road or we wouldn't have as good visibility. This is going to have great visibility, incidentally. Even though it falls off a little bit, the property falls off a little bit from Little Blue Parkway, you're right on a very busy road and signalized intersection. So we're going to have great visibility on this particular property. Some of the other lots, you wouldn't have that, or they're priced for like fast food restaurants and things like that, where it's just way out of our price range. If we can go to the next slide, I'm just trying to remember okay. So this is just a little bit more about proximities, just marketing pieces from lane 4. But again, you can see that this is good proximities for us. The next slide is a letter of intent. This is the, in your files, this is what was the February 22nd letter of intent.
If I could, before we move on from proximity, is there a way to point out how it is in proximity to our other branches? The other ones I know closer are Coleman Road all the way to the south, South Independence to the north, and Blue Springs to the east,
Yes.
and nothing to the west. Because that kind of heads into Kansas City.
Yeah. Not easily.
Yeah.
It's not easily to show that, but yes, what you said is absolutely the case. There's a tremendous gap between where we're talking. Well, let's imagine there is no library there at all. So the gap between Blue Springs North and South Independence is where the gap would be, is considerable. I mean, there are many rooftops, a couple of different commercial entities between there. Going south, you're right, Colburn Road is the next one, which is quite a distance to the south. And there's also some psychological barriers in both cases. So as you're going south to Colburn Road, it's Lake Jacomo, it's Blue Springs Lake that people don't necessarily think about crossing. Same thing on the east to west. You've got Burr Oak Woods. You've got a lot of other sort of proximity differences. And then to the north, it's our Farview branch is really the closest unit of service. Farview or Buckner, but both of the Buckner's 8-10 miles away. Farview is not really going to draw people from that location. The people who live in the existing neighborhoods most probably go, for the most part, go to South Independence. Some of them go to Blue Springs, particularly if their kids are very engaged with the Blue Springs school, because that is, actually, I don't know for certain if that's the Blue Springs School District or the Independence, because the lines are really peculiar right through there. But a lot of the houses and rooftops are Blue Springs School District in there too. So,
But before we go on to the letter of intent, are there any other questions about the site itself?
And I apologize for.
no, it's okay. I should have brought that map. Actually, if we look at last month's building committee meeting, Cody, don't do anything with this, Cody. But members, if you want to go back and take a look at last month's meeting, I think we did have a proximity map in there that shows that.
Or on the website that shows the locations of our current branches.
Exactly, and if you go to Google Maps, and if you find it, and basically this is going to be across I-70 from Menards. So yeah.
So before we go on to the letter of intent, any other questions about the site or the location or?
Yes, this is John. I have a question. Could you go back to the first slide that showed the site itself?
What the middle one more, Cody.
I'm sorry. Yes, that's the slide. The access to that side would that, who's the authority of the building authority on this project? Is it Independence? Is it Blue Springs? Is it Jackson County? What?
City of Independence. It's within city limits of Independence. So.
All right. Would the City of Independence probably require that you see the building across the street? I don't know what that is, but it looks like.
That's the church. Yeah. It's a big church.
And the church has a main access at the at the area. It has two accesses, right? It has one further to the I guess would be the southwest.
Correct.
Would we be required to come in parallel to that or across from that southwest access?
Yeah, that's a good question, John. My initial feel, because there is a significant height difference, which you really can't see on this drawing. So Little Blue Parkway is higher than the site at this point. It would be a pretty steep drive. My recommendation, and I think in the conversations I've had with Brad McKenzie and Jim Coulter about this, is that we would bring people in, that we would build our 2 drive lanes actually on Heartland Drive. So the idea is that people would come off the signalized intersection, and then we would have an entrance closer to Little Blue Parkway, and then another entrance that's sort of closer to that road that goes toward the youth sports complex. So rather than trying to bring people directly off of Little Blue, we'd actually have them turn on the light and then enter our site.
Okay. Yeah, I understand. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions about the site?
Yeah, this is yummy. I guess my thoughts are, I know how big churches and sometimes you can have a lot of traffic on those roads at certain times, and then of course nothing at other times. So I just wanted to make sure we have at least a couple of ways to get there, so we wouldn't have a big traffic jam all the time.
I think I'm familiar with the location, and Yummy, the signal light helps with that there. We've acquired some properties where we've not had signal lights, and then we've had to sort of figure out what that looks like. This comes probably a better prepared site than anything that we've had. The 5.5 acres is a little more than we might need, but given the topography of what it is that it looks like is it, and if they're prepared to give us the 5.5, then this actually has the benefit of some green space really around our library, which has been a new feature of our library system. So I don't anticipate there being traffic jams there or challenges. And if Michelle's on the call, I mean, this is actually really an issue at North Oak about, turning and getting into the library because we don't have a signal. So in this case, this does have a traffic signal, and I think that would address that.
No, I'm on the call. This is not, I mean, to me, I'm over in that area a lot at that Costco coming in and out of town. The light, I think, is going to help. Yeah, this isn't at all like North Oak can be kind of a nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
Getting out of it, not getting in it as much as getting out of it.
Yeah, otherwise it does look like a very nice site.
It's a beautiful site.
And Yami, to your point, you're absolutely right. I mean, I've driven by Church of the Resurrection at the wrong time in Johnson County.
Mhm.
And yes, it can be an issue. As it just so happens, I mean, the church that I attend, if you actually stay on Little Blue Parkway and you just keep going south into Lee Summit, that's the church where I attend. And very often I find myself, well, particularly when my mom was alive, she lived at a place that was just north of I-70. So I would just take that road on Sunday morning from church to visit my mom. And of course, I was at that point approaching the church at the time that church services were letting out. And yeah, it was never really much of an issue. And like Michelle, I'm in the neighborhood a lot. Truman Heartland Community Foundation is in the Blue Ridge Bank building. So I was over there a lot during my presidency. So it's there. Yeah.
In some ways, the advantage of the site is actually it has traffic.
It has traffic control.
And then it has a infrastructure that supports traffic volumes and signal lights and the like. So I know Steve was going to go to the letter of intent. This is Brent Schallmeyer. I want to go to the Red Bridge just because we're swapping things, and so I want us to sort of see what it is that we're swapping. So there's another board doc in there if Cody could pull it up, but this was out of our capital plan, and I actually went and looked at this because I think some, but maybe not everybody's been to the Red Bridge branch, and that's why I wanted to sort of talk about this. So the Red Bridge branch was built in 1987, so that makes it 35 years old. The gross square footage on it is 12,314 square feet. We have not used this for 2 years, 3 years.
Okay. No, actually, to be fair, we have been using it.
Okay.
We've been using it for storage.
Okay.
It hasn't been
It hasn't been a operating library branch. And the reason why Lane 4 is interested in it, actually Lane 4 is our landlord. That is the one branch that, we have two branches for which we are leasing. One is in Green Valley, and we're addressing that. In the case of Red Bridge, we got storefront. It was an old former bowling alley. We pursued ownership, but that was not what Lane 4 was interested in. And so this sits behind this Red Bridge Shopping Center. This was a dormant shopping center that was almost facing collapse. And it has a remarkable resurgence. And in some ways is that our branch has more value to Lane 4 than probably anybody else in the free world. Others might dispute. I mean, we've had offers. We've gone down the path of, offering up a broker, to take a look at it all. But what the advantage of this transaction allows us to swap an existing asset that we have for a really good property that has all the advantages that we previously discussed. We do not incur any cash cost in this through the letter of intent that Steve's going to cover sort of shortly. In addition to this is in our capital building program, our dashboard, we had $750,000 down for land acquisition for East Independence. So by swapping an asset that we are using for storage, I would suggest expensive storage, for a property in East Independence that is where we would want to be. That's the trade. And we have to say, is that a fair trade? And are we getting value of what our asset is in Redbridge for the new property that we are being asked to trade? So I just wanted to put that's the other side of the question. So Joycelyn has a question that I want to go around the room again before we get to the letter of intent.
This is Joycelyn. I assume that our need for storage there will decrease once the branch is built.
Yes. I mean, I would argue, well, actually, this is the conversation that I have with Richie and his team and Aaron Gordon and the folks who are always putting storage in there. It's usually temporary storage. For example, there was storage in there recently for items that belonged at Blue Ridge. And so they were just held locally in the neighborhood so that we could easily get them back to Blue Ridge. There was, I cannot remember what's in there right now. Jake was telling me that there was something that we were looking to use it for. It might be some of the stuff that's ultimately going to go back to Lee Summit might be in there right now. I mean, it's just a temporary holding spot. Frankly, we probably could be putting a lot of it in our existing warehouses. It's just, this is close in proximity, and and we've got staff that are right there next door that can keep an eye on it. So we've been doing it. So yeah, there's not a need for it to be storage, and even if there was a storage need, we wouldn't want to do it there long term. So yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions from those of you who are online about the Redbridge property?
Well, this is John. A question. Earlier, we had authorized staff to enter into a real estate contract with an independent realtor not associated with Lane 4 to see if that property could be sold to someone else. Did we ever actually, or did this new plan intervene on that, or did we have any experience at all actually with that contract, and what, if any, offers did we get on that side?
Yeah, John, I can answer that. This is Steve. A couple things. One thing that happened is at the same time that we were marketing our surplus Liberty branch, we also marketed and tried to sell this branch. In terms of Liberty, we got, I think we got one bid within deadline and another bid post deadline. And you all kind of remember how Liberty went. But at the exact same time, we were doing the same sort of marketing for this branch, and we actually got no comments, no bids for this building. We also we have an email box where we take input, we take requests from people who are interested in buying the property. We get a lot of people who say they're interested in buying the property, but no one interested in making an offer. We get a lot of people interested in asking us to donate the property to them. But and there's at least one person who's talked to us about the property that I don't think is a good proximity. That frankly, I think our landlords would get mad at us if we sold it to them. And I think we would get mad. I don't think that it would be a good neighbor for sort of the lifestyle center that they're trying to build. Basically what they're wanting to do is they want to make a granite countertop warehouse out of the building. So you'll have the premier children's museum in Kansas City. You'll have a great library. You'll have this incredible ice cream store and these great restaurants and a granite countertop storage warehouse. Yeah, I mean, the proximities aren't good. And that's the only one that I probably could have pursued a little more, but never did because the proximities weren't good. And so yes, you're right. The next thing that happened was staff, because we had difficulty gaining interest in the property, we asked for permission to engage a broker. And so then after that meeting, I went back and was continuing to work on East Independence property, multiple irons in the fire. And as I was looking at property ownership in the Jackson County GIS, I noticed that the people who owned the property that I was looking at were located, I just recognized the address as being Lane 4's address. And even though it wasn't called Lane 4, it's called Trinity LLC. I realized it was Lane 4's address. So at that point, I contacted Lane 4 and started talking to them about the idea of the swap. Because I knew that, as Brent said, that our building at Redbridge is probably worth money to other folks, but Lane 4 may be the people that it's probably worth the most to. We had, well, if you go to the GIS, the Jackson County GIS system, they say that our building and property is worth $1 million. If it were on the tax rolls, they would tax it at $1 million, is what they say. We had an independent appraiser look at the building and do an appraisal on it, and he appraised it right around $1 million. If it, not $1 million, just under $1 million. I've shared that. We share that with everybody who asks about the building, and that's probably why no one ever offers us any offer on the building. We shared that information with Lane 4, at which point Lane 4 said, well, Jackson County's got their properties way overvalued, which is not, that's not the experience that most of us know who have properties in Jackson County. And we put our property on the market way less than what it's worth, which of course no real estate agent ever does that. And so I just started, saying, come on, let's get there. You say your property's worth $1 million. We say our property's worth $1 million. We can back it up. You can back up that your property has a market value of $1 million. So let's just trade. And that's more or less where we are today. We never did pursue a broker because, frankly, my feeling is if we could legally surplus this building to somebody, get a piece of property that we really need to do what it is we need to do long term, and keep the $750,000 in the bank that we had set aside for property acquisition, that would be the best option.
Yemi, I think maybe you had a question. I want to make sure I got back to you.
No, I'm good.
All right, Michelle, you have any questions?
No, I don't have any questions. I was just going to say I think it's a fantastic idea. The less amount of time we have building, the better. No Smithville flashbacks.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
See, you can always count on me to make you laugh.
Well, has Michael been able to join the call?
No,
Okay.
Brent, he is not.
All right. When he does, can you let us know? So, all right. So we've talked about the property at East Independence. We've talked about the property at Redbridge. And so if there's no further questions about either one of those two properties, because I want us to think about the swap, I'm going to ask Steve to move on to the letter of intent.
Right. So sorry it took us a little while to get that page up from the capital plan, but hopefully you had a chance to look at that. In terms of the letter of intent that we put together, actually we drafted this, Mid-Continent drafted this, sent it over to Lane 4. And the primary goal here is just to get something on paper to say, this is what we're planning on doing. And then we can start working on actual real estate contracts and things like that. But basically, if you remember when we did the property scan, I think we looked at about 10 pieces of property. There was a preference on this property and another one, maybe a light preference on the third property. Signing the letter of intent pretty much releases those other folks to start making new plans, I would say. So again, this is very Spartan, very basic. In terms of the terms and what's in here, it pretty much just defines the two groups, pretty much just says it's a letter of intent, and holds that sort of weight. that it looks for there to be execution on or before June 30th. And frankly, given what they've been talking about and what we've been talking about, there's no reason why we couldn't meet that. The first paragraph it pretty much defines the two groups. The second paragraph basically says that at the conclusion that Mid-Continent owns the property we've been talking about at Heartland and Little Blue Parkway, and Lane 4 owns the old Red Bridge building outright with no additional terms and conditions. Number 3 says that there will be no exchange of cash in the transaction as any additional consideration, and that each owner is responsible for any of the fees associated with the acquisition of their ultimate property. And then title insurance will be our responsibility for our property and their responsibility for their property. In terms of titles, Lane 4 recommended using First American. Frankly, Mid-Continent, we tend to use whichever one makes the most sense. We don't have a go-to, and so this was their recommendation, and so we put it in there. And then paragraph 6 talks about the right for us to do tests and surveys, and that we do them on our own respective dimes. We did basically put something in here that if something were to be uncovered that was previously unknown, that might result in significant remediation, that the transaction could be canceled. So if all of a sudden we're doing our phase 1 environmental on lot 31 and we discover that it used to be a creosote storage site or something, then it allows us to back away. So like I said, it's really Spartan, but basically the idea is that it just lays out the idea that we're going to trade our property for their property straight up and have everything done before June 30th.
This is Brent Chandler. Any questions on the letter of intent? Because this is the thing that we will be voting on here.
To recommend to the board.
To recommend to the board. Any questions for the 3 of you who are online? Any questions in the room? Somebody want to make a motion?
So moved.
A motion to approve the letter of intent
And
recommend to the full board.
I'll second.
Michelle seconds it. Any discussion? So let's do a roll call here.
Michael? Brent?
Yes.
Joycelyn?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Yummy?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
Ron?
Okay, so let it be noted that we voted on this in open session, that the vote was unanimous, that there were no votes in opposition and no abstentions. Thank you for the conversation today. I know we've had a lot of meetings going on, but this was an important one to try and move ahead to the bottom of our capital building project. One other quick item, I think that we have other listed under agenda. We've worked hard also on the Riverside project, and that Riverside City Board of Aldermen, I sort of call them City Council, Board of Aldermen,
Yes.
have so many different local governments, is going to consider approval of that agreement, and it should be coming back to us in March. And so this is another case where we had a letter of intent, and so we're working through that. And so we want to keep that project moving as well. So appreciate staff's work and effort on that. And there we have it.
Yeah, let me just double check. I know Jake's on the line and Jim, and Jake and Jim have really been bird dogging that as I've been working on these other things. Is anything to add on Riverside, guys? Jake says he has a final conversation with Riverside today after this meeting, so.
And Michelle, I'm curious, have you been by the demolition site?
I'll be honest, I have not because
Okay,
I've gone out in this weather other than the barn, which is the other way.
okay.
That is true. Jake just reminded me he has videos that he can share from North Oak. I'm not actually going to put them up today, but we will put them up someplace in the cloud and you can watch it coming down.
Okay.
But I've seen some of those.
Any other business or comments from anybody on the committee? Joycelyn?
I just want to give a big shout out to you and to Michael for trudging ahead and really keeping this process going. It's easy to get off track, but it's an important process to go through and to complete because we've made promises, and it feels good as a board member to have those promises kept.
And if I can, just to underscore it, to make sure everybody understands what has happened. Now, of course, we still need final board approval, but this is the last property acquisition that was part of the Proposition L promises. You know, we changed the scope on Riverside, so that one's kind of a little bit neither fish nor fowl. But yeah, if we go back to November of 2016, this is an important completion.
Brent, I had one other thing too. Michael did say about the time of this meeting that 10 o'clock was good with him, so.
Yes, we're going to talk about trying to find a time that allows Michael to participate. So we'll work through that, and I'll try to follow up with him today on the vote.
Excuse me, this is John. I just have a comment about that. I have a conflict also, which I'm missing the meeting of the veterans this morning, which ought to be an interesting meeting on the morning of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And I'm missing that, and I don't want to miss others. So if it could be moved away from this date, this time of the month, I would be appreciative.
We will endeavor to do so. We
And
benefit from.
Brent, I've talked to you. Sorry, it's Michelle.
Okay.
I mean, either way, on a Thursday or Friday, a lot of times I'm just going to have to be online, which is, if nobody minds, is fine by me.
We might explore a different day of the week, and it's an open question. We benefit from actually the full participation of the committee. We have gotten a lot. We've done well in sharing perspectives, and I think about Riverside and I think about Green Valley, and so this is important work, and so allowing people to participate is important. So we will endeavor to find a date that accommodates people's schedule, whether online or otherwise. So. Best to everybody today. Stay warm, Michelle. Safe travels, and the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
A quick move there. So anyway, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Deafening silence.